see what the next step is. And in this industry, you will be able to, the first thing you're going to be wanting to work towards is being able to fly the airplane solo, then your private pilot license, then your instrument, your commercial, then your, if you want to go the instructor route, then it's the instructor route. There's so many opportunities. If aviation is not the end goal, corporate, you have military, but there's so many things to do, and there's so many goals. Anything you want to reach for, as cliche as it is, the sky is really the limit, because this career can take you in so many directions.
And so my question is, Christian, do you have any debt from your student loans now? Like you've been in the airlines, what, 3 years now? Did you pay them all off?
Yeah, I paid them all off, and as soon as I got that bonus from the airlines, it was all paid off, because when I was an instructor, I was chipping away at that, at those loans as much as I could, and as soon as I got that bonus from the airlines, I was out. Right now, after being 2 years in the with the regionals, I was able to upgrade to captain, so that's even more money. Now, the goals change. You want to get to the next step, yes, but you can do anything at back, any other financial goals that you want to accomplish.
That's what's up. I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. So we're gonna dive right into today's lesson today. Today's lesson, the basic outline that I want to do today is I want to talk about the PAVE checklist. And right after the PAVE checklist, I have a friend here today. His name is Eli. Eli is he's a CFI who just graduated from Farmingdale State University. So he's from an aviation college too, and an aviation program. So he's way more fresh than I am on this subject. And he's going to cover all the stuff that I missed, and also he's going to talk about the aircraft structure. So we have a little airplane here today, and he's going to go over all the parts of these airplanes, and we're going to talk about that. And once we finish that, I'm going to top it off with some about taxiing the airplane, about climbing the airplane, descending the airplane, taking off, and leveling off. So that's basically what's in store today. So right off the bat, I appreciate all you guys coming in today, and we'll start. So today we're going to be talking about the PAVE checklist. So what the PAVE checklist is, a checklist that we run as pilots every time we fly inside of our heads to make sure that we can perform this flight safely and at an efficient manner, right? So P for PAVE checklist, P stands for pilot, right? And what we look for with that letter is, am I safe to fly, right? So this is called the I'm safe checklist, and everything that I'm talking about right now is in your PHAC. Everyone downloaded the PHAC, right? So if you read in chapter 1 on the PHAC, it's going to talk about this in more detail. But I'm safe checklist. So the first letter of the I is illness, right? So am I sick? So before you're going to go onto the plane, before you're going to learn with your flight instructor, the first thing you're going to do is say, I'm safe checklist. Am I sick today? Am I feeling bad today? Because all those things will affect your performance as a pilot, right? Number 2, the M for I'm safe checklist. M stands for medication. Am I on any medicine today? I have bad allergies. I got pollen allergy. Most Asian people have it, I think. Right? But yeah, it's tough with the pollen allergies, especially in this industry. But one medicine that really works well for me is called Zyrtec. And Zyrtec, basically what it does is it knocks it knocks all that effect of that pollen allergy out. However, it's not approved by the FAA, right? Because you get drowsy when you take Zyrtec. So then in the FAR AIM that we're talking about today that I showed you guys, there's a whole medication section. I think it's part 67, if I'm not mistaken, just right off the bat, like right off that dome. I don't know if I'm right. But it will tell you the list of medications that you're allowed to take before you can fly, right? And then S is stress. Am I feeling stressed today to fly? Did I have a bad day at work? Am I like too stressed about paying for these flight lessons? All that stress will take a big part of your performance, how well you're going to perform on your lesson, or how well you're going to perform as a pilot, right? A, what does A mean? Alcohol, right? Um, Anybody know the limitations for a pilot alcohol? You know, all pilots like to drink, right? If you don't drink, you're basically not a pilot, right? I think the limitation is point 0.04. Is that 0.04? 0.04, right? So you got to make sure that you're. I think Part 61 flying. Yeah, was it 8 hours limitation? 8 hours bottle to throttle. In the airlines, we do 12 hours bottle to throttle, but the regulations is 8 hours. So if you drank alcohol before your flight within that 8-hour period, then you're illegal to fly, right? And then F, fatigue. How tired are you, right? Did I get good night rest? Did I sleep well? And then E means eat. Did I have a healthy meal? You know, did I eat well for the flight? So all this in that PAVE checklist, it's a section with the P is a branch off the I'm safe checklist. So P, you're checking myself as a pilot. Am I good to fly? All right, and all this information is in your PHAC. So whenever you get a chance, like after this lesson, after I teach you guys and you review and you read through chapter 1 of the PHAC, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I understand what this guy was talking about. Okay, that's what he meant, right? So right after the P checklist, the PAVE checklist, the next one is the A, airplane, right, for the PAVE. So A, what that stands for is, now we're gonna check. Oh, where Jeffrey is asking, where's the PHAC? Type in PHAC on google.com and it will show up as a PDF file. Okay. So A as an airplane. Now we're checking if the airplane is good to fly. We don't want to fly a broke down illegal airplane when we flight train, right? We got to fly an airplane that's, you know, that's legalized and everything is there. So the way we check that is by something called the AARO checklist, right? And so everything in aviation has a lot of acronyms, and this stuff is stuff that when you start digging into the ground school, when you see it every day, you'll start remembering what everything means. So for the AARO checklist, A stands for airworthiness certificate. So what is the airworthiness certificate? Eli, can you explain what an airworthiness certificate is?
Yeah. So each plane before it's legal to fly has to go through some tests by the FAA. Once it passes these tests, it will get a certificate that it's airworthy. That means it's worthy to be in the air and it's safe.
Okay, Eli. So does this certificate expire?
No, it does not, unless there is a damage happened to the plane, or there's something that you have to change in the plane, such as a wing or something like big.
So basically, the airworthiness of the aircraft will never expire as long as all the ADs are complied with, right?
Yeah.
And what does ADs mean?
So these are airworthiness directives. The FAA, if something like, we'll take an example such as the 737 MAX 8. You guys have heard about this on the news. They came out with an AD for it. So there's an airworthiness directive. We found this problem, and then this is how you fix it, and this is how long you got to fix it. If you did not comply with the airworthiness directive, by the time they give you, your plane is unairworthy. So your airworthiness will expire by then.
Okay, that's good. So then we move. Okay, the plane is safe to fly. It looks like it has an airworthiness certificate. It looks like it followed all the ADs, the air directives, right? Basically, what AD is like a recall. Like, you know how like the cars have like a what is it, the airbag recall or something like that, or they got a brake recall. So we got to make sure that the airplane is complied with all those recalls, right? The next one, the next letter on the AARO, there's 2 R's, is the radio operating certificate. So anytime the airplane is going to go international, it has to have a radio operating certificate. The next letter on the AARO is O, and O, what is it?
The other R is registration.
Oh yeah, sorry, registration.
So just like your car, the registration expires every 3 years, and you have to get that renewed.
Yeah, so you got to get your airplane registered, and the registration of the aircraft expires after 3 years. The next letter is O, And O is the operating handbook, right? So each plane needs to have, it's called the POH, the Pilot's Operating Handbook. The plane that you're flying, the Cessna 172 that you're flying, or the Piper Warrior that you're flying, or whatever you're flying, has to have the operating handbook inside the airplane. And then the last one, W, right?
Yeah, just a side note on the POH, yeah, that POH will be serial specific. So you can't just take a POH from a plane and go put it in another plane. That POH that came with the plane from the factory has to stay in the plane because it has the same serial number as the plane.
Sounds good. And then the last letter, W, is for weight and balance, right? We got to make sure the airplane, everything is weighed out properly and that it's balanced out properly and it's safe to fly. And is that weight and balance for the passengers also? Or is it just for the airplane itself?
Yeah. So in the POH, you'll have a section about weight and balance, which is also plane specific. That has to be there. And before you fly, when you're doing your pre-flight, you'll do a weight and balance of the plane and what you're putting on the plane. So that's pilots, passengers, or cargo. That has to be on board with you too.
So just to recap right away, right? So PAVE checklist, P, and I think Parker Middleton, he put the exact chapter of the in the footnote of where it is in the PHAC. He just typed it in the group chat. But basically, the P stands for the pilot, and with the pilot, we go on to the I'm safe checklist, right? This is everything we're doing right before we jump into the airplane. And then A is the airplane or the aircraft, and we just ran through the arrow checklist, right? Now we're jumping on to the V. V means environment, so EN, environment, right? So what we're talking about the environment is we have to check out for the weather to make sure that it's a good day to fly, that it's not low clouds where we have to be instrument rated, that we can, and it's not too windy. We want to make sure that it's a safe environment to fly in, right? We don't want to fly when it's gusting at 40 where you can't learn anything as a student. You want to fly when the winds are relatively down. You have good visibility. The statute miles is good. Oh, what is this? Okay. What is Wendy doing? There you go. All right. And then also in the environment, it's just not, it doesn't just have to do with the weather, but it can be with your family or your finances. If you're like super stressed out about the finances of paying for flight school, that can affect your performance. That could deem you not safe, right? And the last letter, E, it stands for external pressures. So let's say we have somebody who's saying, let's say you like your instructor, he's really trying to build hours. He don't care about you. He don't care about anybody else. He just wants to build hours and make money so he can eat. Just for example. And let's say the weather is like gusting at like 35, and the weather's bad, it's not safe, and it's really turbulent out there, but your instructor is like, hey man, let's go. Like, it's all good. We can still learn. You got to be able to learn. You got to be able to fly in any weather. This is what's going to make you a real pilot. And let's say he's giving you those pressures. Or let's say you already have your private pilot license, and my friend Eli is like, hey man, we gotta get to Philadelphia today. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The weather's almost IFR. It's almost instrument flight rules. What are you talking about? Like, we're not gonna scud run. Scud running means that you're flying right under the clouds at a low altitude. RIP Kobe, but basically what Kobe was doing, right? So like maybe, he's like, hey man, I gotta get there. I gotta get to the Mamba Academy or something like that, right? And no offense to Kobe. I love Kobe Bryant, all right? So I don't want anybody to take offense to that. But that's what get theiritis is, right? So you got to look at the external pressures. So the PAVE checklist, once again, is something that you do every time you start to get into an airplane. So pilot, make sure you're good to go. Airplane, make sure that aircraft is airworthy, has all the checklists inside, that it's good to go. Environment, make sure the weather is good. And then external pressures, make sure you're at a safe environment so you can learn how to fly, and everything that they're teaching you, you'll be able to absorb in. All right. So I just went over the PAVE checklist, and this is all in the PHAC, right? So every time I teach a lesson, I want you guys to go back into the PHAC and just be like, okay, I understand what this guy was talking about. Okay, now I understand, right? So now we're going to move on to the airplane structure. And at this part, my friend Eli is going to help us with the airplane structure.
So really, an airplane can be separated into 5 parts. We have what we call an empennage, a fuselage. You got the wings, the landing gear, and the power plant. Has anyone heard about these before? I see. Yeah, I see a head shake. All right. So really, the fuselage is going to be the main cabin area. That's where you put that's where the crew is going to be, your passengers and the cargo. So that's going to be the big part right here. You guys can see it. That's called a fuselage. The empennage is going to be the back of the plane. So that's going to be your tail. The wings, pretty self-explanatory. That's going to be the wings on top. And then your power plant is usually where your engine is. Now, when you're flight training, when you're first going for a private pilot, you'll probably be in a single engine. So you're going to have 1 power plant section. If you're in a multi-engine, you'll have 2 power plant sections. Most of aircrafts in aviation, we really worry about weight. So we want to minimize as much weight as we can. And usually most airplanes are built around carbon fiber and plexiglass. So that's because they're very lightweight material, and that's what we want. We want to be able to put more cargo in there. We want to be able to take more friends on a flight. So manufacturers help us out as pilots, and they'll reduce weight as much as they can as long as the plane is safe to fly. Also, there's 2 types of fuselages that you'll see. There's a monocoque type and a semi-monocoque type. Monocoque is really a French word, but a monocoque is just like a can. It's empty on the inside, so it can get damaged really quickly. As if you take a can and you just squeeze it, you can see that it's able to squeeze. We don't want that with a fuselage. A semi-monocoque has stingrays inside of that aluminum can, let's say. Just like if you see on bridges, they're supported by stingrays. That's what you're gonna have inside the plane, and that's gonna help it with the damage and being bent. Next, we'll just talk about what's on the plane itself and like the flight controls. That's what we call them. You're gonna have flaps, ailerons, a stabilizer or a stabilizer with an elevator, and rudders. So we'll start with the ailerons. The ailerons are usually on the end of your plane, which we call it the wingtip, and they're gonna go up and down. Those are gonna help the plane bank left and right. So when you're banking left, your left aileron will go up and your right aileron will go down, and the plane will bank to the left. And vice versa, if you want to bank to the right aileron will go up, left aileron will go down. Then you have the flaps, which are also on the wing, but they're usually closer to the fuselage, so they're closer to the pilot. Flaps are used to either during takeoff or landing, and they help the pilot have a steeper approach during landing while not increasing airspeed. Because as you know, probably Peter talked about it last lesson, if the plane is pitching down, it's going to increase airspeed due to gravity pulling it. We don't want that during landing. We want to be able to have a steeper approach, but not without increasing that airspeed. And that's what flaps are used for. We usually increase flaps in aviation, in GA, general aviation. You'll have 3 settings, depending on the plane. You got 10 degrees, 25 degrees, and the last one is 40 degrees. We'll probably go more into detail which each flap will do and how will it help you out. Some of them will increase lift, and others will increase drag, and there's different types of flaps. just the same as there's different types of ailerons. Going to the back, we're going to have the rudder, which is on the top of your tail, vertical stabilizer. And that's going to help us with the yawing motion. So going left and right is basically yawing just like that. And that's what we're going to use during taxi. And that's what Peter will go through later on. And finally, on the back, on the bottom, depending on the plane you have, let's say this is a Cessna. The Cessna will have a stabilizer with an elevator. The elevator on the back is what helps us pitch up and down. So pitching is really increasing altitude or decreasing altitude. And this is what we use. We pull back on the control yoke, the elevator will go up, and the plane will increase its pitch and climb. And vice versa, if you push down on the control or the yoke, the elevator will go down, the plane will start pitching down. Now you have other surfaces such as trim tabs on the back of the elevator. Trim tabs are used to help us as pilots to relieve control. You don't really want to be fighting with the plane at the all time. You actually want to fly. I teach my students to fly the plane with 2 fingers. The trim tab on the back or the anti-servo tab, depending on, again, on the plane that you have, will go in the either opposite direction or in the same direction as the elevator. Again, depending on the plane you have. That's why looking at your POH is important, because it will tell you what you have. And that will help us relieve control. And without going into too much detail, that's pretty much it about aircraft structure and control surfaces.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eli. Once again, thank you, Eli. And now we're going to just talk about what to expect on your first flight lesson, right? So now you're pulling up to your local flight school and you're going on your first introductory flight or your discovery flight, or it's your first lesson ever inside the airplane, right? So what it always starts off with, it starts off with a checklist. And if you see any airplane checklist, it will start off with a pre-walk around. And a pre-walk around will just be like taking out the cowl plugs, keeping out the tail cover, checking the fuel quantity and stuff like that. And then we go into the cockpit pre-flight inspection. So just in case, like, it's impossible to memorize everything on this checklist. So we always want to have the checklist in our hand, and we just want to go through it one by one. So for example, the cockpit pre-flight inspection for a Piper Archer would say something like parking brake, set, documents checked. So what are we looking on documents? We're looking for the registration. We're looking for the airworthiness certificate. We're looking for the operating handbook, right?
And usually by law, the airworthiness and registration have to be in the plane and visible to passengers.
Yep.
So you want to make sure it's somewhere where passengers can look for it and see it without really like ducking under anything else.
And the next thing that you're going to be looking and checking is called the hob time and the tack time. So this is important for you guys when you're becoming a flight student, because this is how much this is what's going to tell you how much you're flying in the air and how much you have to pay. So the tack time is what the engine time on the airplane. It moves a little bit slower than the hob time, and the hob time is what the airplane schools and the flight instructor is going to charge you, and it's also that time is what's going to go into your logbook, right? So that's how you know if you're in the air and you look at the hop time and you will see, okay, I'm about an hour in, I'm about 1.5 in, I'm about 1.3 in. And so that's how you can keep a gauge. If you don't know anything, if you're not paying attention to the hop time, somebody can run you up to like 2 hours and 3 hours or something like that, and you wouldn't even know. Okay, so that's what the hop time is, right? So that's just the cockpit pre-flight inspection, and there's a lot of things, and this checklist is always inside of the airplane that you're going to be flying, and that's what you're going to be using, right? And so after you finish the pre-flight inspection, you move on to the exterior pre-flight inspection, which consists of, seeing if there's any damage to the fuselage, seeing if there's any damage to the wings, seeing if there's any chocks or anything blocking the structure of the aircraft, right? So after you finish the pre-flight inspection, then you go into your before start checklist. So basically, just for you to get off the ground and the plane to move, you have to run through all these items. And all these items, you'll get, like, at first, how long will it take you? Like 20 minutes to do it?
It'll take you, depending on the student, it will take between 20 to 30 minutes.
20 to 30 minutes just before you even start the engine,
Yep.
right? So, but then as you progress in your student pilot, as you get better as a student pilot, at that time will go from 30 minutes to 10 minutes, or 10 minutes to 7 minutes, right? Oh yeah, cool. Yep. Oh yeah, Christian Cordado is just putting up the documents that we need on board on the text, right? And then now this time I want to talk about, like, now you got the checklist all done and you got the airplane started, and your instructor is like, okay, let's move on to the runway, right? The way we control the aircraft on the ground is not with our hands. It's not with the yoke. If we want to drive to the right, it's not we go right. If we want to drive to the left, we turn the yoke to the left. The way we control the airplane on the ground is with our feet, okay? So usually for a Cessna and a Warrior, it's basically the same. The way it works is your brakes on the airplane is on the top of the rudder pedal. So if you move your feet to the top, the airplane will come to a stop. Now, if you want to move to the right, you'll push on the right. If you want to move to the left, you'll push on the left. So once again, the yoke will not do anything on the ground. So if you want to move forward, you're going to increase the throttle, right? If you want to stop, you're going to bring back the throttle to about 1,000 to 900 RPM, whatever it is, and then you're going to stop on the top of your rudder pedal. Hopefully that makes sense. Now you guys are going to probably ask, what are we doing with the yoke then? What does the yoke do when we're taxiing on the ground? And taxiing, what that means is when you're driving on the ground, right? The yoke is important on the ground because these airplanes are very light and they're very small. And what could happen if you don't put in the proper crosswind corrections while you're on the ground, the airplane could flip over. So your feet is controlling your directional control, where you want to go to the right or where you want to go to the left, or vice versa. What your yoke is going to be doing is you're going to be putting in the proper crosswind corrections as you're going and as you're moving, right? So at this time, I just wanted to talk to you real quick about putting the proper crosswind corrections in, because this is not, people don't talk about this a lot in your first lesson or second lesson or third lesson as you're flying. And I feel like if they don't talk to you about this, that means the flight instructor is going to be doing the taxiing. But I want you guys, when you get to your first flight and when you start flying first, I want you guys to be driving the airplane. I want you guys to be putting in the proper crosswind corrections. All right, so the way it works, I hope you can see this. So this is your yoke. Is it too far away? Can you guys see it? Hold on. That is your yoke right there, right? So let's say the wind is coming in from right here. Anytime the wind is coming towards you, you always want to turn the yoke to the wind. All right. So, for example, I don't have a drive. I don't have a racer. Let's say the wind is coming this way. What you're going to do is you're going to turn the yoke all the way this way. So your yoke is basically going to look like that. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah, Christian, does it make sense? Can you see it, Christian?
Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah. Can you see the drawing now?
Yeah,
I
I
can
can
see
see
it.
it going.
Okay, cool.
I can see the drawing, yeah. So anytime the wind is in front of you, you want to turn into the wind.
Exactly. Anytime the wind, so let's say it's coming from the right and it's coming towards you, you're going to turn your yoke to the right. So your yoke is going to look like this. And that's the way you're gonna leave it there on the ground. And this is also in the PHAC, right? Now let's say you made a turn and the wind is now coming behind you. The wind is coming from behind you, right? So let's say the wind is a quarterling tailwind, right? What you're gonna do with the yoke is you don't leave the yoke where it's at a neutral position. You go with the wind. So you'll turn your yoke with the wind. So if the wind is blowing this way, you're gonna turn your yoke that way. And also you're gonna push it down. You're gonna push the yoke forward.
Hey, Peter, you
So
mind
let's
if
say
I
the
hop in
yoke is
real quick?
coming. What's up?
You mind if I hop in real quick?
Yes, Alex, thank you.
I just wanted to mention that the easy way I always remember this is if you have a headwind, so the wind's in front of you, you turn into the wind, and if it's behind you, you dive away from it. So the yoke's forward and you're turned away from the wind. That was the easiest way for me to always remember which way to do it.
Yes. And this is so important because we do this not only, in a small airplane, we also do this. Hold on. What the hell? Hold on. We also do this in the big airplanes too when we take off, right? So but the thing about the small airplanes, because it's so light, when you taxi on the ground, and let's say you turn right, you turn left, you turn left, you turn right, and whatever direction you're going, you're constantly changing your yoke and putting the proper crosswind corrections. Does that make sense? So next time you guys go into your intro flight or when you get your first flight lesson, right? Basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna have the RPM to about 1,000 to 900. We wanna get that plane starting to move. And the speed that the airplane is taxiing on the ground is gonna be a brisk walk. So not too fast, not too slow, just a brisk walk. And we're gonna be putting in the proper crosswind corrections. Now you might be thinking, how do you know where the winds are coming from? Right? All right, we know that we got to put in the proper crosswind corrections, but we don't know where the wind's coming from. The way you know where the winds are coming from is going to be listening to that ATIS. That the ATIS is a weather brief, or look around the airport and look for a wind sock. If you see a orange little cone or orange little sock blowing, you'll know exactly where to put your crosswind corrections as you're taxiing out. Okay, so Alex just typed it in on the PHAC where the information is. So anytime you're on the ground, remember you're using your feet for directional controls, and with the yoke, we're putting in the proper crosswind corrections all the way to the runway, right? And now your instructor, when he's flying with you on his first flight, he's going to be impressed. He's going to be like, man, this guy already knows how to put the proper crosswind corrections in, right? So right off the bat, Christian.
So, like you were saying earlier, with getting the ATIS and being able to understand where the winds are coming from, you want a technique that will help a lot is being able to bug the heading indicator. So if the winds are coming from 030, bug that specific heading. That way you have a visual inside the cockpit of where the winds are coming from. That way, wherever the bug is set to, you want to dive into that marker. And like Alex was saying, if it's behind you, you dive away from it. In addition to cones, looking to see if you don't have the luxury of getting the ATIS right away, you can look at cones, you can look at flags, you can look at the way the trees are blowing, you can look at water on the ground, the way the rivets on the water are, in what direction the rivets are going. There's so many clues that can help you where to determine where the wind is coming from.
Sounds good. I appreciate that.
And you combining that with the techniques that Alex was saying.
Yep. And now we got the taxiing down. We're pulling up to the runway, and now they say, hey, Cessna 356 Charlie, you're clear for takeoff. So basically what you're going to be doing, now I'm going to be talking about the takeoff portion, right? Once we get centered, aligned with the runway, the airplane is on the runway. We're going to take 3 seconds to slowly increase the throttle from wherever it was, from 1,000 RPM, or if it was at 1,100 RPM, whatever, all the way to the max power in your airplane, which is going to come out to be about 2,500 RPM, or maybe 2,600. It depends on the plane. So in 3 seconds, it's just going to be a gradual push all the way to max power. And what's going to happen is, after you put that throttle all the way to full power, your airplane is going to want to turn and jerk to the left. And this is called P factor. And the reason why it does that is because the way, you want to explain P factor real quick?
All right, so we call those the turning tendencies. There's really 4. 2 of them will really affect you. They're on the ground. There's a P factor and there's torque effect. I'll explain torque real quick because that's the easiest to understand. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Everything in the engine is turning to the right. Your propeller is usually turning to the right, so it will have a tendency to turn to the left because it's an opposite reaction. P factor is really has to do with the propeller of your airplane, and it's the fact that the blade that's descending, well, let's do it this way because it's turning to the right, will catch a bigger bite of the air than the one that's going upwards. So it will create more lift towards the right and then yaw you to the left as an opposite direction.
Yep.
It's kind of hard to visualize, but it's easier if you look at, I think it's chapter 5 in the PHAC. They will explain the different turning tendencies, the 4 different turning tendencies.
Yeah, so definitely it's going to be hard to visualize, but you'll definitely feel it on your first flight. So once you increase that power, the plane is going to want to turn to the left, and you're going to increase a little bit of, the way we're going to keep that plane straight on the center line is by increasing a little bit of right rudder with your feet. And we're going to be rolling down the runway. And as we're rolling down the runway, we're checking the engine instruments, make sure everything's in the green, the oil pressure's in the green, the fuel's in the green, the oil temp's in the green. And then we're seeing the airspeed indicator. We're going to see the airspeed indicator start to pick up and start to rise. And about 60 knots on a Cessna or a Piper Warrior or whatever you're flying, you're slowly going to input that back pressure in. As you're slowly inputting the back pressure in, what you're doing is, you know, the dash of the Cessna and the dash of a Piper Warrior or whatever you're flying, the dash, you're going to match that dash to the horizon, to the outside horizon. So as you're rolling down the runway and you slowly start to rotate, the outside horizon you see, you're going to match that dash right to that horizon. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring you up to a climb anywhere between 70 to 90 knots. But we really want to climb out about 80 knots. But that's the visual reference, because on the ground, we're looking outside and we want the airplane to be running straight. And as we rotate, we're just matching the dash to the horizon. And then after you match the dash to the horizon and you're climbing and you're off the ground, you can do the smaller adjustments on the airspeed. All right, so that's how you're going to take off. And as you're taking off, you're going to have a slight pressure on the right rudder to keep the airplane coordinated, right? We don't want the airplane to fly sideways. And remember, we still have that torque effect. We still have that P factor. We still have those left turning tendencies. So as we're climbing up, we want to have a little bit of pressure on your right foot. So right after, the way you level off, right? Let's say you have to level off at, you're climbing out and your instructor says, hey, let's level off at 2,000 feet. The way we level off in an airplane, on a small general aviation airplane, is usually 10% of your vertical speed climb is when we start to make a change in our our inputs and our controls, and that's how we level off. So for example, like a Cessna will be climbing out at 500 feet per minute. 10% of that is 50 feet. So right when you see your altimeter and you see it past 50 feet, what you're going to do is you're going to slowly pitch forward. You're going to slowly pitch forward. So now your dash was on the horizon. As you pitch forward, your dash is going to leave the horizon. And what you're going to do about 4 fingers from the dash, and the horizon, you're going to match that as your outside reference. And you're going to bring it into a straight and level flight. What's going to happen is you had full power in, your airspeed is going to start to increase from 80 knots. It's going to start to increase 90, 100, or 105. Once you have that airspeed that you want for that level cruise, you're going to slowly bring that RPM back to about 22, 2300, or 2100, whatever your instructor says. Once that happens, you're going to trim it out to relieve any pressure. So that's how you level out. So anytime you level out on a climb, 10%, just remember 10%. So 50 feet prior, that's when you're going to start doing your input corrections. And then when you descend, same thing. Descend, I'm talking about descend real quick. You're at straight level flight. What you're going to do is you're going to bring back the power to about 1700, 1600, or 1500, whatever your instructor says. And then you're going to bring that dash down from that 4-finger view. We're going to make it a 6-finger view, 6 fingers. And we're going to keep that 6-finger sight picture from the dash to the horizon. And that should give you about a 500 feet per minute descent. And the same thing, 50 feet before your altitude that you want, or the assigned altitude, you're going to increase the back pressure and slowly bring back the RPM to about 2300. Okay? So today I wanted to talk about those things because those are the things that you're going to do on your first flight. I wanted to talk about taxiing. I wanted to talk about crosswind corrections. I wanted to talk about your takeoffs because that's definitely going to happen on your first flight. Usually on the first intro flights, if your flight instructor is not that comfortable and does not have that much experience, he's going to want to take off by himself and then give you the controls when you're in the air. But I want you guys to go to your first lesson and have the confidence that you could keep that airplane on that center line and you guys actually take off, all right? You guys know exactly what to do, right? You're going to bring that dash right up to the horizon and just climb out at 80 and with a little bit of right pressure, right? And 88, what's that? Yeah, and one thing Eli wants to add.
I really want to a little backtrack and go back to the PAVE checklist. When you're talking about the airplane, I know we talked about the aero, and that's the documents that are required in the airplane. I want to talk about maintenance-wise, what the airplane has to go through. A lot of flight schools out there, maintenance is a really big part of the cost for flight schools, so they try to take little shortcuts and all that. So for you guys to be as safe as possible, you have to know that acronym, which is AV8. So it's AV1ATE. That's really all the maintenance that every airplane has to go through. You got your annual, so that's usually every year. VOR checks, that's going to be an instrument that's checked every 30 days, mostly for instrument flight. So if you're usually going for private pilot certificate, you don't need to worry about that. Your 100 hour, every 100 hour, the plane has to go through an inspection. That's if the plane is used for hire, so flight schools. Your altimeter and your pitot-static system, so that's going to be the instruments inside of the plane. Those have to be checked every 24 months, so that's going to be 2 years, 24 calendar month. Your transponder, that's usually how ATC sees us in the air. That's also got to be checked every 24 calendar month. And finally, an ELT, which is an emergency locator transmitter. That's got to be checked every 12 months. And an ELT is, God forbid, if your plane crash, that's how they're going to find you.
That's all in the PHAC. So I really, this is all what I had planned for today's lesson. And yes, Jesse, the finger reference is a good starting point of the pilot's height. Yes, thank you, Parker. So at this time, I just want to open up the mics here. So I have three airline pilots in the class today. I have Parker, Middleton, Christian, and Alex. They're all here. If you guys have any questions, I want to open up the mic right now and so we can have a discussion. Any questions about the airline or any questions about, what we talked about today?
I got a couple.
Hey, what's up, Tosh? Yeah, sure.
I had copied everything except I didn't get what V standed for in the PAVE. That's the only one I didn't get.
Oh yeah, so V stands for environment. ENV.
Environment.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And another thing is when you're taxiing, is there certain speeds you can go at? Like, is there like a limit for all planes, or
Yeah, we always want to
fast?
taxi at a brisk walking pace. Just because if you taxi kind of faster than that, your airplane could pick up a little bit of lift, and when it picks up a little bit of lift and a little bit of gust, it could flip the airplane over.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, I had a question real quick.
Hey, what's up, Off the Grid?
Hey, I'll introduce myself as well. My name is David. So I just had a quick question. Whenever you are taxiing, is there a switch that will switch from like nose wheel steering to when you are using your rudder? Because like, for example, I'm a crew chief on the F-16, a fighter jet, and there's a switch in the cockpit that will go from nose wheel steering on the ground to when you hit the runway and you take off, you can press that switch to start using your rudder for the yaw, you know? Is there a
Yeah.
switch on like that for normal aircraft or whatever?
So I'm gonna give this question to Parker. Parker Milton, if Parker can jump on and just say something about that.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah, so there is no switch in most general aviation airplanes. You'll find that a lot in large aircraft, turbine aircraft, but in a general aviation airplane, when you press the rudder pedal, it's going to move the nose wheel and the rudder at the same time.
Okay.
So both will be moving together.
Okay. That makes sense.
There is a little variation in certain models. The Cessna specifically, when it's in the air, the nose wheel will not move, but the Pipers in the air, the nose wheel will move in the air.
Okay.
That's just based off design, but it's nothing the pilot does.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, I had a question also, Peter. So since we're talking about basic planes, I guess, and now we're talking about, I guess, fighter jets, is there any difference between regular, planes and the ones in the military?
I don't know, man. I never flown a fighter jet before, so
Or, whatever kind of planes they have in the Air Force, do you know, or anybody in here know, like the guy off the grid?
Yeah, so I'm actually a crew chief on the, I'll talk on that a little bit. I'm a crew chief on the F-16, which is a fighter jet that we use in the Air Force. And so I guess I don't know a lot about general aircraft. I know a lot about, I guess, what I work on, in the Air Force. And I guess one big difference that we have on fighter jets that are not on general aviation aircraft is like how earlier in the lesson they're talking about there's flaps and there's ailerons, right? Two separate flight controls. On the F-16, we have flaperons. So it's both of them combined. They will do the same job. They'll do each job what a flap does and what an aileron does, but it's one flight control on each wing. And yeah, so that's one big difference there is. And then another difference there is from general aviation aircraft to fighter jets is we don't have a yoke, or I'm not exactly yoke, right? We don't have one of those in the front of the cockpit. There's actually a side stick controller. So if you're sitting in the, like, so let's say you're sitting in the cockpit, right? You sit in the chair or whatever. Your right arm stick over here, like, and that's your controls. It barely moves. It's super sensitive. It almost feels like it's stuck. But for a fighter jet, you need those little tiny inputs to be able to perform the maneuvers you need to be able to do for whatever,
all right. Anybody else have any other questions regarding the airlines or regarding flight schools or regarding today's lesson? Yes, sir. Yeah. Maybe Chris, you want to answer that one?
I can think of one question right now that pops up to my head is, I would say instructor availability.
depends what your availability is, of course, but if your instructors are there to get time and they're booked all the time, it's going to be very difficult to get on their schedule. So in order to combat that, you want to be able to schedule your lessons in advance within a week or two so that you have what you want, what schedule you want. I mean, as of right now, that's all I could think of, Peter.
Yeah, and basically, when you're looking for flight schools, they're gonna want to have you to buy like a block time, like 10 hours or 20 hours or whatever, or buy a package or something like that. But anytime you give a large sum of money to somebody else, you lose your power, right? So if you hold on to your money, they need you as a student, and they are willing to work with you, and you have the power to control what. But once you give 10 hours worth of money to them, now you're working off their availability. You're working off their schedule, if that makes any sense. Answer. Okay.
And I can jump in on that just a little bit. Peter is correct. A lot of flight schools will do the block time, and you don't have to be too cautious over it. It will get you a better deal, but you may not want to choose it prior to doing at least one lesson with them and with the instructor. So you kind of know that that's where you want to be before you spend that. You can always ask as far as what their refund policy is. As far as that goes, the flight school I worked at, the block time was a much better price as far as per hour. The other thing as far as looking for flight schools is don't be afraid of older aircraft or aircraft that are less technologically advanced. Generally, you can find a much better price. And personally, as an instructor, I believe the older aircraft and the simpler aircraft are actually much better for a new student.
Absolutely. People ask me, what airplane should I fly? Should I have to fly a G1000 Cessna 172? Should I do this or should I do that? I always tell the students, fly, if you're skinny enough, fly a 150. If you're a little bit bigger, fly a 172 Piper Archer, but try to fly the cheapest airplane. And then when you become a CFI, then fly those kind of airplanes. But I've flown a 6-pack airplane all the way till until I got my flight instructor certificate.
I'll hop in real quick on this one too, Peter, if you don't mind.
No, I love it.
We always found when we were teaching that it's a lot easier to learn on the old method. With the 6-pack, we talk about the round dial gauges in the airplane instead of the glass plane, because when you want to move on someday, there's always going to be newer technology, and it's a lot easier to adapt to the newer technology than it is to learn on the latest and greatest and then have to go backwards at some point and learn the tougher version. So I'm a huge advocate, like Parker is, for learning in the cheaper, older airplanes, because you're only going to go up from there. And like us at the airlines, we fly a plane that probably every other plane we fly at the airlines will be more advanced, more automated than it someday, but there's a benefit to that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Is that all the questions you guys had today?
I've got one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is it better to go to a flight school privately or go to a flight school where an airline, where it's like an airline flight school? Like, is there like a difference to that, or?
You understand the question?
You mean a flight school that's affiliated with an airline?
Oh yeah.
If you can, go to a flight school that's affiliated with an airline where an airline will guarantee you an interview once you're done, that will be great. You just gotta see how they will through it and how much it's gonna cost you. Sometimes these flight schools will gouge their prices just because they can basically guarantee you an interview. That really is a personal for.
Yeah, I mean, really, a flight school that guarantees you an interview is not a flight school that guarantees you a job.
Okay.
If that makes any sense, So, like Alex just put up on the chat, a lot of schools offer a discovery or introductory flight, which is a lot cheaper than their actual price. So it might be like $129 or $115 or whatever. Try out like 3 flight schools. because even though you go to 3 different flight schools, those 3 hours that you just did on the introductory flight counts towards your private pilot license.
All right, okay.
Also, really change anything because, as we talked about before, the airlines are kind of killing themselves to find pilots. So either way, you will find a job if you get all your licenses and you're a safe pilot. So really, don't choose the flight school just based on if they're going to guarantee you an interview later on.
Yeah, I think I got somebody else has a question. Is that it?
What age do you recommend to start?
I got a question.
Yeah, sure.
For Christian, which college did he go to flight school?
I went community college in New Jersey. It's Mercer County Community College. It's an agreement with the Trenton Airport. They're paired up with Infinity Flight School.
Okay, thank you.
It's a 2-year program. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, guys. We'll wrap up today's lesson.
Oh.
And I really appreciate Alex and Christian and Parker to be jumping on. I hope we'll do another one on Monday, and I'll put up another lesson plan for that. If you haven't checked it out, on the Facebook, I put up a video of what goes on when you take off at a Class Delta airport, what the radio calls you do and stuff like that. You guys could just check that out real quick. I typed it all out because I had a student anyways who was learning that. So I hope you enjoy today's class, and I'll see you guys on Monday. And thank you, Christian, and thank you, Alex, and thank you, Parker.
Thank you.